The mysterious arrival. The Corsith Coalition's Grand Hall was buzzing with activity. Delegates from dozens of alien species filled the room, their voices creating a chaotic symphony. This was no ordinary day. It was the annual summit, where the most powerful alliance in the galaxy decided matters of war, trade, and exploration. This year, the tension was higher than usual, with rumors of pirate attacks and border disputes spreading fear among the delegates. High above the Coalition's homeworld, the orbital defense station scanned the void of space. For centuries, the Coalition's fleets had kept the galaxy under control, ensuring their dominance. No force had ever dared to challenge their might, but this confidence would soon be shaken. Out of nowhere, the station's sensors picked up an anomaly. A massive object, far larger than any known ship, appeared on the edge of the system. It wasn't there one moment, and then suddenly it was. The station's commander, a reptilian alien named Sorrel, barked orders to his crew. "Get me a visual feed. Now." The screen flickered, and gasps filled the control room. The object was a battleship, black as the void and bristling with weapons. Its design was unlike anything they had seen before, sleek, intimidating, and ominously silent. No signals, no identification, nothing. Sorrel's scales rippled with unease. "Who does it belong to?" he demanded. The communications officer hesitated, then said, "It's human." The room went deathly quiet. Humans. The very word sent a shiver through the crew. They were supposed to be extinct, or at least irrelevant. Hundreds of years ago, humans had been a rising power in the galaxy, ambitious and fearless. But they had been crushed in a brutal war, betrayed by the Corsith Coalition itself. After that, they had vanished, retreating to the far corners of space. Most assumed they had perished. But now one of their ships had returned. And it wasn't just any ship. It was the largest battleship anyone had ever seen. As news of the mysterious arrival spread, the Coalition summit erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices filled with panic. The insectoid ambassador from Strix clicked her mandibles nervously. Why would humans send such a ship? Is this an invasion? The feline diplomat from Drash shook his head. Perhaps they seek revenge for the past. We cannot ignore the possibility. The Coalition's leader, a towering figure with glowing blue skin named Velker, raised his arms for silence. "We must not jump to conclusions," he said, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "Send a scout ship to investigate. We need to know their intentions." Meanwhile, the human battleship remained motionless, like a predator observing its prey. Its sheer presence seemed to suck the courage out of everyone who looked at it. No energy weapons were active, but the ship's systems radiated power. It was a silent warning. We are not to be underestimated. A small Coalition scout ship approached the battleship cautiously. Its pilot, a young and eager Gornaxian, tried to establish communication. "This is Captain Lyr of the Corsith Coalition. You are in restricted space. Identify yourself, or we will be forced to respond." There was no reply. Lyr repeated the message, his voice trembling slightly. Still nothing. He decided to move closer, scanning the battleship's hull for any signs of weakness. As he neared, his instruments went haywire. The ship's systems were being overwhelmed by some kind of signal. Lyr shouted to his crew, "Get us out of here." His transmission abruptly cut off. Back on the orbital defense station, Commander Sorrel stared at the blank screen where Lyr's face had been moments ago. "What happened?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir," a technician replied. "The ship just disappeared." Disappeared. Sorrel's voice rose in anger. "You mean they destroyed it?" "There's no debris, sir," the technician said, his voice shaking. "It's like they just took it." Panic spread through the Coalition forces. Across the system, fleets scrambled into position, forming a defensive line around the homeworld. Velker ordered the Coalition's most advanced ships to prepare for battle. If they don't respond to our hails, we'll have no choice but to treat them as hostile. As the coalition debated their next move, the human battleship finally showed signs of life. Its massive engines roared to life, and it began moving toward the coalition's central planet. Every sensor in the system focused on the ship, watching its every move. Then, without warning, a voice echoed across every communication channel in the system. It was calm, commanding, and undeniably human. "We warned you once before. You didn't listen." The message sent chills through the coalition leaders. What warning? When? Was this some kind of test or a declaration of war? Nobody had answers. Velkor stood frozen, his glowing eyes fixed on the display. "What do they mean by that?" he muttered. No one knew. But one thing was certain. The humans had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. The alien response. The Corsith Coalition was a well-oiled machine, boasting fleets of advanced starships and disciplined soldiers, yet the sight of the human battleship shook their confidence. Alien admirals and strategists crowded war rooms across the galaxy, studying the silent ship as it crept closer to their central planet. Its ominous presence cast a long shadow over every coalition world. In the coalition High Command's war room, holographic projections of the battleship filled the air. Velkor, the coalition's leader, stood at the center, his glowing blue form flickering in the light of the projections. Surrounding him were the coalition's top minds. Thorak, the battle-hardened reptilian commander. Drissa, a feline strategist known for her cunning. And Zinel, an insectoid diplomat skilled in deciphering alien intentions. "This is no ordinary ship," Drissa said, her sharp claws tapping nervously on the table. "Look at its design, streamlined for both speed and defense. We can't even identify the materials. Whatever it's made of, it's beyond our capabilities." Thorak hissed, his tail snapping against the floor. "We have no time for analysis. If they won't respond, we strike first." "No," Zinel's voice clicked, his mandibles twitching. "If they wanted to attack, they would have already done so. They're sending a message by simply being here. We must understand it before we act." Velkor raised a hand, silencing the debate. "We sent a scout, and it vanished. That alone is an act of aggression." His glowing eyes narrowed. "But we cannot risk an all-out war. Not yet. Dispatch a fleet, but do not fire unless provoked. We need to show strength without escalating the situation." In orbit, the coalition's second fleet mobilized, their warships forming a perimeter around the battleship. The fleet commander, Admiral Tyrax, was a towering brute with metallic armor grafted into his body. His voice was a guttural growl as he barked orders. Weapons charged, shields at maximum. No sudden moves. "Let's see if this ghost ship blinks first." Tyrax's flagship, the Corsith's Wrath, took point, its massive cannons trained on the human ship. The battleship remained eerily still, as if observing the fleet's movements. Tyrax sneered. "They think they can intimidate us. Let's show them what real power looks like. Send a probe. Get me a detailed scan of their hull." A sleek probe shot from the Corsith's Wrath and sped toward the human battleship. It closed the distance in seconds, but as it neared, something strange happened. The probe's signal flickered, its systems failing one by one. Then, in an instant, it disintegrated into a cloud of dust. Admiral Tyrax's jaw tightened. What did they just do? "Unknown, sir," a technician stammered. "It wasn't a weapon. They didn't fire anything. It's like the probe was dissolved." Before anyone could respond, the human battleship began to move. Slowly, deliberately, it turned to face the coalition fleet. Its weapon systems flared to life, glowing with an energy signature unlike anything the coalition had ever seen. The fleet braced for impact, shields raised, but the battleship didn't fire. Instead, a new signal spread across all channels. A transmission, simple and chilling. "You will not survive a fight. Stand down." The voice was calm, but carried an undercurrent of absolute authority. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Back in the war room, Velker clenched his fists. "They're toying with us. They're warning us," Zeinl countered. "We should listen." Sorak slammed his clawed hand on the table. "Warnings are for the weak. We are the strongest power in this galaxy. If they think one ship can." The lights in the room flickered, and a low hum filled the air. Velker turned sharply. "What is that?" The holograms shifted, and for a moment, the human battleship's image seemed to stare directly at them, as if it were watching. The hum grew louder, then stopped. An alert blared, and a technician shouted, "High command systems have been breached." "What?" Velker demanded. "They're inside our network," the technician stammered. They've disabled our planetary defenses." A stunned silence filled the room. The Coalition's central planet, home to billions and the heart of their power, was now defenseless. In orbit, Admiral Tyrax faced a similar crisis. One by one, the Coalition warships reported system failures. Weapons went offline, engines powered down, and shields collapsed. It wasn't an attack, it was control. "They're disabling us without firing a shot," Tyrax whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. On the bridge of the human battleship, a lone figure watched the chaos unfold. The captain, a stern woman with steely eyes, spoke to her crew. "They still don't understand." Her second-in-command, a young officer, hesitated. "Do we press the attack?" The captain shook her head. "No, not yet. Let them feel the weight of their helplessness. Only then will they listen." Back on the Coalition's homeworld, Velker stood frozen, watching as the fleet in orbit became a collection of powerless husks. He felt the weight of the humans' warning pressing down on him. "What do they want?" he whispered. The human battleship's voice answered across every channel once more. "This is your second warning. Surrender your leaders. The truth will come to light." The Coalition was no longer in control. The galaxy had just been reminded of something terrifying. Humanity wasn't just back. They were playing by their own rules. The human threat. The galaxy had never seen anything like this. The Coalition, with its vast fleets and impenetrable defenses, was powerless against a single human ship. The humbling realization spread like wildfire across their worlds. On the surface of the Coalition's central planet, the population of billions stared at their skies, where their mighty fleets floated, now dark and inert. In the Coalition war room, Velker gritted his teeth as he watched live feeds of the disabled ships. "This is an act of war," he said through clenched jaws. Zeinl, the insectoid diplomat, shook his segmented head. "No, this is a demonstration. If it were war, we would already be dead. What they've done is impossible." Sorak snapped, his scales flaring with frustration. No single ship could disable an entire fleet without firing a shot. Drissa, the feline strategist, leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing. "Perhaps not a single ship, but what if this is only the beginning? If humanity has built this, what else have they been hiding?" Above the planet, the human battleship continued to drift, unbothered by the growing panic it had caused. Inside the colossal vessel, the air was tense, but not with fear. It was a tension born of purpose. The captain of the battleship, Commander Ilara Miles, stood at the center of her bridge, her steely gaze fixed on the holographic display of the Coalition's capital city. Around her, her crew worked in perfect synchronization, their movements precise and deliberate. "Status report," Ilara commanded. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Cade, responded immediately. "The Coalition fleet is completely neutralized. Their planetary defenses remain offline. Resistance probability, 0. Ilara nodded. "Good. Proceed with Phase 2. Cade hesitated. "Permission to speak freely, Commander." Ilara glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Granted. Do you think they'll surrender their leaders? The Coalition isn't known for humility." Ilara's lips curved into a thin smile. They won't surrender, not willingly. But when the truth comes out, they won't have a choice. In the Coalition's archives, the scramble to uncover humanity's plans had begun. Historians, intelligence officers, and analysts pored over old records, desperate to find a clue. What did the humans mean by the truth? Deep in a secure vault, a long-forgotten file was unearthed. It was a report, dated centuries ago, from the war that had nearly destroyed humanity. The Corsith Coalition had used bioweapons, illegal, horrific bioweapons, against human colonies. Billions of men, women, and children had perished. The official story claimed it was a necessary measure to prevent humanity's unchecked expansion, but the file revealed something darker. The Coalition had wiped out the humans because they feared them. Humanity's rapid technological advancements had threatened the balance of power in the galaxy. The bioweapons were not a last resort. They were a calculated genocide. Velcor read the report in silence, his glowing eyes dimming with every word. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with disbelief. We did this. We killed billions to protect our power. Zynel, standing nearby, clicked his mandibles. The Coalition kept it hidden. We buried the truth and hoped it would never surface. And now, Drissa said grimly, it's back to haunt us. The battleship moved again, this time descending toward the planet. Its dark hull cut through the atmosphere like a blade, its shadow falling over the Coalition's capital city. The sight sent waves of fear through the streets. People fled into shelters, whispering prayers in 100 different languages. The battleship hovered above the Coalition's central government building. Slowly, methodically, it deployed drones, small black machines that darted through the air like insects. These drones bypassed every security system and entered the building, transmitting live footage back to the battleship. On the human ship's bridge, Ilara watched the feeds with cold precision. Broadcast the truth, she ordered. Across the galaxy, every communication channel, civilian, military, private, was overridden. Screens and holoprojectors everywhere displayed the ancient Coalition files. The horrors of the bioweapons, the targeted extermination of human colonies, the Coalition's lies, all of it was exposed for the galaxy to see. The reactions were immediate and explosive. On Coalition worlds, civilians rioted in the streets, demanding answers from their leaders. In the outer systems, long-oppressed species saw the Coalition's hypocrisy and began to rebel. Even among the Coalition's military, there were murmurs of dissent. Velcor watched in horror as his empire began to crumble. We must act, he shouted. Destroy that ship. How? Drissa asked, her tone sharp. Our ships are useless. Our people are turning against us, and the galaxy now sees us for what we are. Monsters. Back on the battleship, Cade turned to Ilara, his expression grim. They won't surrender, Commander. They'll fight to the bitter end. Ilara's gaze was unyielding. Then we'll make them fight on our terms. She activated the battleship's main weapons array, not to fire, but to unleash a wave of energy that disabled the Coalition's communication grid. Their leaders were now isolated, unable to coordinate their forces. The Coalition's might was unraveling, and humanity hadn't fired a single shot. Phase 3 begins now, Ilara said, her voice calm but resolute. The battleship's engines roared to life. Humanity's reckoning was far from over. The silent warning. The battleship's ominous presence over the Coalition capital was a dagger poised to strike, but it hadn't yet descended. Its restraint was louder than any weapon, its silence more chilling than war cries. On the streets, billions of Coalition citizens stood frozen, their eyes glued to the sky. The Coalition's once proud leaders, however, were anything but calm. In the High Command war room, Velcor paced like a caged predator. We've faced rebellions, rival empires, and even the scourge of the Void Plague, he growled. But now we're brought to our knees by a single human ship. Zynel stood by the room's main console, his antennae twitching as he scanned for updates. This isn't a war, Velcor. It's a reckoning. They'd weaponized their history against us, and the galaxy is listening. And our fleets are silent. Drissa added, her golden eyes narrowed. Our leaders hiding behind old lies while our people burn with fury. If we don't act decisively, we lose not just power, but everything. Velker slammed his fist onto the table. Enough. If words won't save us, action will. Prepare an infiltration team. We'll board that ship, take it from within, and force their surrender. The Coalition's elite strike team was assembled within hours. Soldiers from the most ruthless species in the Alliance, equipped with stealth suits and cutting-edge weaponry, boarded a small, untraceable vessel. Their mission was simple: breach the human battleship, disable its systems, and capture its crew. As their ship approached the battleship, the strike team's leader, a cold-blooded strategist named Relos, issued final instructions. No mistakes, no hesitation. We don't know what's inside that ship, but we've faced worse. Humans bleed just like anyone else. Their stealth craft slipped through the void, bypassing the battleship's outer sensors. It docked silently against the hull, its crew moving quickly to cut through the ship's armor. But the moment they breached, they realized something was wrong. Inside, the battleship was eerily quiet. The corridors were vast and dark, lit only by faint, pulsing lights. The air was heavy, charged with an unnatural energy that made their skin crawl. Relos activated his scanner. No life signs in this section. Move forward. Stay alert. They advanced cautiously, their boots echoing on the metal floors. The deeper they went, the more alien the ship felt. Human ships were known for their functionality, but this was something else. Sleek, almost organic in design. Strange markings lined the walls, glowing faintly as they passed. "What is this place?" one of the soldiers whispered. "A trap," another muttered, gripping his weapon tightly. Meanwhile, on the battleship's bridge, Commander Ilara watched the strike team's every move through hidden cameras. She leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "They're predictable," she said calmly. Lieutenant Cade glanced at the screen. "Should we engage them?" Ilara shook her head. "No. Let them come. They need to see what they're truly up against." The strike team reached what appeared to be the ship's core, a massive chamber filled with pulsing, crystalline structures. The air here was alive, humming with energy. In the center of the room stood a single console, its surface glowing faintly. Relos gestured for his team to spread out. "Search for vulnerabilities. If we can disable the core, we'll cripple the ship." One of the soldiers approached the console cautiously. "Commander, this doesn't look like human tech. It's something else." Before Relos could respond, the room came to life. The crystalline structures flared with blinding light, and the hum grew into a deafening roar. A voice echoed through the chamber, not from the ship's systems, but from everywhere at once. "You were warned." The soldiers froze, their weapons raised. The voice was calm, but carried an undeniable weight of authority. "You sought to invade, to destroy what you do not understand. And now, you will see." The light enveloped the room, and suddenly, the strike team wasn't in the chamber anymore. In an instant, they were standing on a desolate battlefield. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of death. Around them were the ruins of human colonies, shattered buildings, and the charred remains of families who had fallen victim to the Coalition's bioweapons centuries ago. "What is this?" One soldier gasped, his voice trembling. "It's an illusion," Relos said, though his own voice was uncertain. The voice returned, more resonant this time. "Not an illusion, a memory. Our memory. The truth you buried." They were forced to witness the horrors of the past, the cries of children, the screams of the dying. Every step they took, the devastation deepened. The strike team, hardened by years of war, felt their resolve breaking. This isn't real," Relos insisted, but his voice wavered. "It is as real as the blood on your hands," the voice replied. On the bridge, Ilara watched, her gaze unflinching. "Phase 2 is complete," she said quietly. Cade glanced at her, his expression uneasy. "You're sure this is the right way?" Ilara's voice hardened. "They need to understand. The galaxy needs to understand. If they won't listen to words, they'll listen to fear." Back in the war room on the Coalition capital, Velker's console lit up with a new transmission from the battleship. The human voice was calm, deliberate. "We offered you peace. You chose violence. Now your people will know the truth of what you've done. Surrender your leaders, or we will finish what you started centuries ago." Velker stared at the screen, his glowing eyes dimming with dread. For the first time in his long reign, he felt powerless. The galaxy trembled, not from the roar of battle, but from the silence of humanity's wrath. The hidden agenda. The Coalition's strike team was never heard from again. Their last known location, a breach point on the human battleship, remained a black mark on the Coalition's tactical grid. While Velker and his inner circle argued over their next move, chaos erupted across Coalition worlds. The broadcasted truths of their ancient betrayal had turned their citizens against them. Riots broke out in the capital's streets. Protesters demanded accountability from their leaders, chanting for answers about the horrors of the past. The once proud Corsith Coalition was fracturing, not from human weapons, but from the weight of its own buried sins. On the human battleship's bridge, Commander Ilara Miles watched the unfolding chaos on her holographic displays. Coalition worlds, once unified under fear and power, were now ablaze with rebellion. Civilians dismantled statues of their leaders. Military officers defected. Entire systems declared their independence. Lieutenant Cade observed silently, his brow furrowed. "We're destabilizing the galaxy. If this continues, the entire Coalition could collapse." "What then?" Ilara's gaze was cold. "That's the point." Cade hesitated. "Are we here to destroy them or something else?" Ilara stepped closer to the main display, her tone turning sharp. "We're not here to destroy them. We're here to dismantle the lie they built their empire on. Their betrayal of humanity didn't just kill billions of our people, it allowed them to rise unchecked. That ends today." Far below, Velker convened an emergency council with his remaining allies. In the war room, the atmosphere was suffocating. Screens displayed Coalition planets in turmoil, their military forces too paralyzed by the human battleship's silent dominance to intervene. "We can't surrender," Thorak growled, slamming his clawed hand on the table. "If we give in now, we lose everything." Driss's feline eyes narrowed. "We've already lost everything. The humans didn't just reveal our crimes. They revealed our weakness. Our people see us for what we are. Surrender might be the only way to preserve what's left." Velker's voice cut through their bickering. "No, we don't surrender. Not to them." His glowing blue eyes flickered as he gestured to the screen showing the human battleship. "They've shown us their strength. But every weapon has a weakness. We find it. We exploit it. And we remind the galaxy why the Coalition has ruled for centuries." Unbeknownst to Velker, the humans were already several steps ahead. Deep inside the battleship, Ilara met with her intelligence officers in a secure chamber. A massive hologram of the galaxy hovered between them, with key Coalition systems marked in red. "This isn't just about retribution," Ilara said, her voice firm. "It's about reshaping the balance of power. The Coalition isn't just guilty of genocide against humans. They've suppressed countless species, exploiting them to maintain their dominance. That ends now." A younger officer, one of the battleship's data analysts, raised a hand. "Commander, we've intercepted their latest plans. They're preparing a counterstrike. Coordinated attacks from their remaining loyal fleets." Ilara smirked. "Let them try. Their fleets are scattered, and their communications are compromised. They'll be fighting blind." Cade stepped forward, his expression serious. "But what if they still manage to land a hit? Even one lucky strike could turn the tide. We're powerful, yes, but we're still one ship." Ilara turned to him, her voice calm but commanding. "This ship isn't their target. We are their distraction." Cade's eyes widened. "The real mission?" Ilara nodded. "It's already underway." Across Coalition space, subtle changes were taking place. Unmanned human drones infiltrated key Coalition systems, not to destroy, but to subvert. Infrastructure that kept the Coalition's economy running began to fail. Transport hubs shut down. Starports lost power. Trade routes, once bustling with activity, fell silent. The Coalition was grinding to a halt. On one world, a rebel leader, a grizzled, four-armed alien named Torvin, received a coded message. It was from the human battleship, offering weapons and support for his uprising. Torvin hesitated, knowing the risks, but his people were starving, and his cause was desperate. Back on the battleship, Ilara stood alone in her quarters, gazing out at the stars. Her reflection stared back at her in the thick glass, her face betraying no emotion. She opened a small holoprojector, and a familiar voice filled the room. "Commander Miles," said the recording, the voice belonging to an older man. "When you take this ship into Coalition space, remember why you're there. It's not just for the past, it's for the future. Make them see what humanity has become. Make them understand." Ilara's fingers tightened around the device. "They'll understand," she said softly. "By the time we're done, they'll never forget." On the Coalition's central planet, Velker's fleet launched in a last-ditch effort to intercept the human battleship. The skies above the planet filled with shimmering warships, their weapons primed and shields at maximum. Velker himself took command of the flagship, determined to lead the charge. As the Coalition fleet approached, the human battleship remained motionless. Its silence was a taunt, a statement that no attack could truly harm it. "Fire everything," Velker roared. A wave of energy blasts surged toward the battleship, their brilliance lighting up the void. But as they neared the human ship, the weapons disintegrated mid-flight, their energy absorbed into the battleship's shimmering hull. What is this?" Velker stammered, his confidence cracking. The battleship's voice cut through the comm channels, calm and unwavering. "We warned you. Now, you'll understand why." The battleship's weapons powered up, not to destroy, but to unleash a wave of electromagnetic energy. The Coalition fleet's ships went dark, their systems fried, their engines dead. Velker's flagship drifted helplessly, its crew staring in horror as the human battleship loomed ever closer. "You fought for control, for power, for centuries," the voice continued. "But now you'll learn what it means to lose everything. Your time is over." The galaxy trembled, not just from fear, but from the realization that humanity's hidden strength was more than a force. It was a reckoning. The revelation. Velker stood on the bridge of his flagship, his once proud posture now hunched with defeat. Around him, his crew stared blankly at the darkened consoles. The fleet that had been the Coalition's symbol of dominance now floated powerless in space, crippled by the human battleship's electromagnetic pulse. The voice from the human ship cut through the silence once more, calm and resolute. "You've lived in lies for too long. It's time for the galaxy to know the truth." A sharp crackle echoed as the Coalition's remaining comm systems were overtaken. Every screen, every holographic display across Coalition space lit up with the same transmission. It wasn't just the Coalition watching now. The entire galaxy tuned in. The transmission began with images of humanity's colonies from centuries ago, lush and vibrant. Voices narrated scenes of prosperity, exploration, and unity. Then came the shift, the sudden betrayal. The Coalition's warships striking without warning, bioweapons deployed across human worlds. The beautiful colonies turned to wastelands, their people reduced to ash and shadow. Velker watched in silence as the truth of his empire's rise unfolded before him. The Coalition's strength hadn't come from fairness or cooperation. It had come from genocide. In the war room on the surface of the Coalition's capital, Zenel turned to Drissa, his voice a mix of awe and dread. This isn't just a condemnation. It's a rallying cry. They're rewriting the galaxy's history, and we're the villains. Drissa's feline eyes narrowed as she studied the transmission. Because we are the villains, they're not just exposing us. They're using our sins to destroy everything we've built. And the worst part, they're succeeding. Back on the battleship, Commander Ilara stood at the center of her bridge, watching the chaos her broadcast had unleashed. Systems across Coalition space were failing as rebellions gained momentum. Formerly enslaved species broke free, toppling their oppressors. Entire planets declared independence, some aligning themselves with the humans, others forming their own alliances. Lieutenant Cade approached her, his expression conflicted. It's working. But it's not just the Coalition collapsing. Entire systems are in anarchy. Innocents are caught in the crossfire. How far do we let this go? Ilara didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy. This isn't chaos, Lieutenant. It's rebirth. The Coalition's order was built on blood and lies. For the galaxy to move forward, their empire has to fall. But what happens after? Cade asked, his voice softer now. Ilara turned to him, her eyes steel gray and unwavering. That depends on whether they can change. We're giving them a choice: face their sins and build something better, or be consumed by the same darkness they cast upon us. The Coalition's citizens, now fully aware of the horrors their leaders had committed, turned against them. Across Coalition worlds, uprisings reached a fever pitch. Velker's face appeared on 1,000 screens as he delivered a desperate address to his people. Citizens of the Coalition, do not be deceived by human propaganda. Yes, mistakes were made, but our unity, our survival, depends on our strength. If we fall now, the galaxy will be plunged into chaos. But his words rang hollow. His people had seen the evidence, undeniable and raw. On one distant world, a young Coalition soldier watched the broadcast with his squad. He turned to his comrades, his voice trembling. They've lied to us our whole lives. We're not heroes, we're monsters. Another soldier nodded, throwing down her weapon. I won't fight for them anymore. And like that, the Coalition's military began to unravel. Velker's desperation boiled over. Prepare the remaining fleet for a counterstrike, he barked. Drissa stepped forward, her tail flicking with frustration. There's nothing left to strike with. We've lost control of half our systems. Even if we had ships, we can't communicate with them. The human ship has dismantled us without firing a single lethal shot. Zenel's voice clicked from the corner of the room. They don't need to kill us. We're doing it ourselves. Velker's glowing eyes dimmed as he realized the truth. The Coalition wasn't losing. It had already lost. Above the capital, the human battleship powered its engines. Slowly, deliberately, it moved closer to the planet, casting a shadow that blotted out the sun. For the Coalition's leaders, it was as if judgment itself had descended from the heavens. On the bridge, Ilara addressed her crew. Open the final transmission. This is their last chance. Across the galaxy, her voice resonated once more, calm and commanding. To the Corsith Coalition, your empire was built on genocide and lies. You've oppressed billions, destroyed worlds, and hidden your sins behind false righteousness. But the galaxy sees you now. Surrender your leaders to face justice. Disband your fleets. Only then will this end. Refuse, and you'll face consequences beyond your understanding. In the war room, Velker stared at the screen, his hands shaking. He turned to his council, his voice breaking. Do we surrender, or do we fight to the last? Drissa's voice was calm but firm. Fighting means extinction. Surrender might be survival. Velker's claws dug into the table. Then it's over. Everything we built, gone. It was never ours to begin with, Zinel said quietly. As the human battleship loomed closer, its weapons glowing faintly, Velker made his decision. His glowing blue eyes dimmed further as he lowered his head. We surrender. Across the galaxy, the Coalition's surrender sent shockwaves. A reign that had lasted for centuries crumbled in a single moment. On the human battleship, Ilara allowed herself a small smile. Phase 3 is complete. Humanity's justice is served. Cade stood beside her, his expression unreadable. But the galaxy is watching, Commander. What we do next will define everything. Ilara nodded. Then let's show them what humanity has become. The battleship powered down its weapons and began to transmit plans for a new galactic council, one built not on dominance, but on cooperation. The Coalition had fallen, but the galaxy's future was still unwritten. The galaxy changes forever. The surrender of the Corsith Coalition was not the end. It was the beginning of a new and uncertain era. Across the galaxy, power vacuums formed as Coalition systems fractured, their citizens grappling with the weight of newfound truths. The Coalition's leaders, Velcor among them, were transported aboard the human battleship to face justice, not in secret chambers, but in full view of the galaxy. Velcor sat in the battleship's holding chamber, his glowing blue eyes dimmed with shame and defeat. The cell was stark, but not inhumane, designed not to humiliate but to isolate. For the first time in his long reign, he had no audience, no advisors, no power. The door slid open, and Commander Ilara Miles stepped in, her uniform crisp, her expression unreadable. She stood silently for a moment, studying the once mighty Coalition leader. Velcor broke the silence. So this is how it ends. Humanity's revenge. Ilara tilted her head, her voice calm but firm. This isn't revenge, Velcor. It's accountability. You weren't just a leader. You were the architect of genocide. Billions of voices silenced because you feared what humanity might become. And yet here we are. Velcor's shoulders slumped. You've won. What more do you want from me? Ilara leaned in, her gaze piercing. The truth, not just for humanity, but for the galaxy. You will face trial, and the galaxy will hear your confession. Every lie, every secret, every atrocity. You will own it. The trial was held aboard the battleship, broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Velcor and his council stood before a tribunal of human officers, rebel leaders, and neutral mediators from species long oppressed by the Coalition. Evidence was presented. Records, testimonies, and the haunting images of human colonies destroyed by bioweapons. Velcor initially denied the charges, but as the weight of the evidence mounted, his defenses crumbled. When the recording of his own orders, issued centuries ago, was played, his facade finally broke. I did what I thought was necessary, he said, his voice hollow. Humanity was growing too fast, too ambitious. We acted to protect the balance of the galaxy. Ilara, serving as humanity's representative, countered. You didn't protect balance. You destroyed it. And in your fear, you ensured your own downfall. The galaxy is not a cage for you to control. It's a home for all of us to share. The verdict was swift. Velcor and his council were sentenced not to death, but to exile on an uninhabited world, stripped of technology, and left to survive on their own. The decision was symbolic, an end to their tyranny without perpetuating the cycle of violence. The galaxy's reaction was mixed. Many celebrated the Coalition's fall and the promise of a new beginning, but others feared the chaos that followed. With the Coalition gone, countless systems now stood on their own, vulnerable to opportunistic warlords and resource-starved factions. On the battleship's bridge, Lieutenant Cade watched the aftermath unfold on the holographic map. Entire regions of the galaxy blinked red, signifying instability. The Coalition's fall has created more problems than it solved, Cade said, his voice heavy. Ilara nodded, her expression thoughtful. That was always the risk. But freedom is never without cost. The question now is how we guide the galaxy forward. Cade raised an eyebrow. Guide? Humanity hasn't been part of the galactic stage for centuries. Do you think they'll trust us to lead? Ilara's gaze was resolute. We're not here to lead. We're here to offer something the galaxy hasn't had in centuries. Choice. No empire. No domination. Just a chance to rebuild together. To that end, the battleship began deploying drones, not as weapons, but as beacons. These drones carried messages of unity, inviting species from every corner of the galaxy to join a new coalition, not one built on fear, but on cooperation and mutual respect. One of the first to respond was Torvin, the rebel leader who had fought for his people's independence. His message was brief but clear. We'll join you. But know this, if humanity turns out to be like the Corsiv, we won't hesitate to fight. Ilara smiled faintly at the message. Fair enough. The battleship also reached out to species that had long been neutral, including the enigmatic Varandians, a highly advanced race that had remained isolated for millennia. To everyone's surprise, the Varandians responded positively. Their ambassador appeared via hologram, his crystalline form shimmering. Humanity has changed, the ambassador said. We have watched. You could have destroyed the coalition, but you didn't. That restraint speaks louder than words. We will support your efforts. As weeks turned into months, the galaxy began to stabilize. Former coalition worlds rebuilt, free to govern themselves. Independent alliances formed, some aligning with humanity's vision, others pursuing their own paths. The battleship, once a symbol of fear, became a beacon of hope, traveling from system to system, offering aid and guidance. In time, a new galactic council was established, with humanity playing a key but equal role among many species. The council's charter was simple: no species would dominate another, and all would work together to preserve peace and prosperity. On the edge of the galaxy, in a quiet moment aboard the battleship, Cade found Ilara staring out at the stars. "Do you think it'll last?" he asked. Ilara didn't look away. "Nothing lasts forever. But it's a start." For centuries, humanity was seen as a threat, a mistake to be erased. Now, we're something else, a reminder that even after the darkest of times, there's still hope for something better. Cade smiled faintly. "And if the galaxy forgets?" Ilara finally turned to him, her expression unwavering. "Then we'll remind them." The battleship powered its engines, its sleek form vanishing into the vast expanse of space. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, but as custodians of a brighter future. The galaxy trembled no longer, but watched, hopeful and uncertain, as a new era began.